Hello and welcome to IDology Podcast. I'm your host, Jesse,
And I'm your host, Brendan.
and today we have Omar on the podcast. Omar, can you
Hey,
introduce yourself?
yeah, I'm from the US basically.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a pretty typical person, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
And
So, uh, you messaged us and you told us that you were an Islamist.
right.
Could you explain the what you believe in? What does the term Islamist entail?
It's pretty much a large umbrella term that could encompass a wide range of different things.
Mm-hmm.
But for me personally, it means the Sunnah and the Quran and the full Sharia, what we call it.
Mm-hmm. Now we are very unversed in Islamic, traditions and beliefs. Could
Right,
you
terminology and whatnot.
Yeah, exactly. So could you expound a little bit upon kind of what you personally believe in?
So to get all of it, I'd probably have to do a little bit of backstory, so I'll just backtrack
That's
a
great.
couple years.
Okay, that's fine.
So it all started in around high school. I was raised by a Catholic mom and a Protestant father,
Mm-hmm.
the typical middle class, you know, but the deep South, Bible Belt, traditional conservative, like Republican, that type of area.
Yeah.
And so, uh, the opinions and whatnot that I've come to develop. It all started in the year of high school, actually, which we had a world geography class.
Mm-hmm.
It was actually pretty knowledgeable about all this kind of stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
every month or so, we would go onto a new unit. We would study a map, have a map test, and learn about that particular culture or religion.
Mm-hmm.
And we got to the Middle East and about the religion of Islam and like a guided notes sheet with some basic info and dotted down and whatnot.
Yeah.
But it pretty much intrigued me. Home, started doing my own research, and basically started going from there.
Okay. So you also told us that you got in a bit of trouble. Did you say your junior year?
Right. Uh, yeah.
Okay. Oh, and can we back up for a second? Do you mind telling us what state you're in? What state you were from, or which state you went to high school in?
Mississippi.
Okay. Yeah. And like I said, you told us that you got in a little bit of trouble with the law.
Right.
So
So
how did that go down?
a little bit. Um, yeah, my junior year, I was a new convert to the religion,
Mm-hmm.
and I was basically not even in the religion for a whole year before the summer of 2014 came, and
Mm-hmm.
the whole World Cup ISIS thing, Islamic State, blew up all over social media and how they hijacked the hashtags with propaganda videos. And so every time you would search World Cup, it would come up with the videos and the executions and whatnot,
Mm-hmm.
all of the propaganda videos and whatnot.
Yeah.
And that I happened to be really vulnerable to that propaganda.
Mm-hmm.
Summer of 2014 to around October 2014 is when I guess you could say my radicalization took place. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So what exactly did you do? So you got involved with their social media outlets?
Right. I
Mm-hmm.
was so you have the main group, which is the Islamic State on the
Yeah.
ground,
Mm-hmm.
and they also, which has a huge media wing, and they also
Yeah.
have well, they don't have it really anymore on Twitter, but back then, uh, thousands and thousands, if not millions, of supporters on Twitter. Twitter didn't really moderate it at all back in
Mm-hmm.
those early days, and so circulate and spread and information and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
It was like a huge storm, and so I was involved in those early Twitter days.
So what was your job? Did
Uh,
you send out tweets? Did you do stuff like
oh
that?
yeah,
Uh-huh.
uh, just paste it link that has old screenshots of because we suspended our accounts from Twitter
Mm-hmm.
constantly, and I have a bunch of pictures of my suspensions and
Mm-hmm.
accounts and whatnot.
Yeah.
But basically, we would just circulate propaganda whenever a new release came out. We would circulate it, and we would debate with people, and we were kind of like the equivalent of like I don't know if this would make much sense, but the alt-right trolls on Twitter.
Yeah.
Like we were probably the I.D.ology kind of thing,
Really?
but
That's
for a
interesting.
completely different cause.
So, what from what I take it that Milo does, he'd kind of put out those tweets that would be, kind of divisive and controversial,
Right,
designed to kind of like pull in some people, like a specific demographic.
right. That's exactly correct.
Mm-hmm.
What we would do.
Yeah. Okay.
The
So, oh, sorry. Keep going.
Yeah, the main demographic would be Muslims in the West who are basically the current arrangement of things and whatnot.
Mm-hmm. They're dissatisfied with the current arrangement.
Right.
Okay. So, what exactly got you in trouble for? Because you told me you got arrested.
Now in hindsight, I know this because and whatnot,
Mm-hmm.
but uh, it was about a month after I officially myself with the Islamic State. It was November of 2014 when I actually started to get under surveillance, and it
Mm-hmm.
was September of 2015 when I actually got arrested. So it was about a little less than a year of a gap between surveillance
Mm-hmm.
and the time when I actually was detained. And ironically enough, the date I was arrested was September 11th, 2015.
Really?
So what was that experience like? Did you have police show up at your house and
Oh
bring
yeah,
you in? And
oh yeah. Well,
how long were you
still in high
arrested
school
for?
at the time,
Mm-hmm.
and the police went to the school to interview people who I was friends with or connected to or talked to at the school, and
Was it a
the
very
school
big school?
at all like a small southern town
Mm-hmm.
high school, so people didn't really know anything about what I was doing at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the police went to the school first.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently, the, they went to the school administration, and the school called my parents at the time for a meeting. And
Mm-hmm.
I knew something in the back of my head. I knew exactly uh, what that entailed. So I actually packed a bag at the door and refused to go to the meeting. And eventually, I was caught doing that, trying to. In hindsight, I know that was probably not too bright of an idea.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, I was go straight to the county jail. I went first. I was checked into a psychiatric ward at a local. Uh, and I stayed there for about a week, more or
Mm-hmm.
less.
Yeah.
And the police came during that time. In the house is when the police raided my room at the time, and confiscated all electronics and religious material and all of that good stuff.
Yeah. So what did
Coming up with the charge.
they did what?
It but they did all that stuff before actually coming up with a charge,
Oh,
like
okay. Yeah.
stuff like as evidence and whatnot.
What did they actually charge you with?
Uh, I got really lucky. It was a misdemeanor of terroristic threats.
How old were you at the time?
17.
Okay.
Yeah, 17 at the time.
Yeah. That's a really young age to go
Right.
through
It is,
something
yeah.
so big, and
Most of the Islamic State Twitter people back in those times, I assume all over the news you have stories about people traveling to the battlefield, and most of them are teenagers.
yeah. Wow. So were you frightened? Were you very nervous, when you
Oh yeah.
realized that everything was going to happen this way?
Oh yeah. I checked into the psychiatric hospital. I knew things weren't going to look too good for the foreseeable future.
Yeah. So were you voluntarily went to the psychiatric hospital?
No, I tried to resist. Like I said, I had a backpack and an atlas, and I walked right out the door, but I was
Yeah.
again over there.
So what you told us you had a probationary period from
Right.
using the internet. So
Right.
you went to the psychiatric hospital, and then they also gave you that.
Well, the internet stuff came from the judge in my case. Detained in the county jail for about a month. I think it was about 36 days. September 11th to October 15th of 2015, and the October 15th was my court date where I pled guilty. And it was that night they released me on an ankle monitor on house arrest, and for the next 6 months I couldn't go on the internet or anything like that.
Yeah. So, what was the effect of that after you were released? I mean, how'd your family and friends kind of respond to that?
It was a huge shock, really. Regret a lot of it, a lot of disappointment and whatnot. But I think for the most part, my family was supportive to me as a person, not to my stuff that got me in trouble in the first place, but supportive to me as a person. Really, I was lucky to get through it relatively easily.
Yeah. Your family, you said they were all Protestants?
My mom's side and all of their family, my grandma is actually born in the Philippines, and so she's a Filipino Catholic who immigrated to the U.S. And so all my mom's family and all that are Filipino Catholics and whatnot, and my dad's side are all Southern, the white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, basically.
Wow. So you heard about Islam in high school,
Right.
And
Geography class.
yeah. So what was the thought process? Did you say to yourself, well, this sounds interesting, I'll look into it further? Is that kind of how it went down?
Pretty much. We got a guided note sheet, and somebody asked in the class, "Are those the people who pray on the rugs and stuff?" And my teacher went through this long explanation of how 5 times a day and put their head on the ground and whatnot. And it intrigued me because it seemed like that was a great deal of dedication on their part. So it made me want to. And that's where it all started.
It was the piety of the faith that kind of impressed you.
Right.
Okay. So how long I'm sorry, how long did you say you were told to stay away from computers?
That was a 6-month probationary period,
Okay.
which
So,
was extremely lucky. I've
yeah.
the same situation as me, have like 2 years off of electronics.
Hmm. Okay. Are you what do you think would have happened to you if you had not been, you know, thrown in court and charged with the terroristic misdemeanor? Misdemeanor.
I would probably veered away from the Islamic State ideology
Hmm.
and would probably right now be in Syria either fighting or deceased,
Really?
just as we hear about other teenagers.
Yeah.
And yeah,
So you what kind of what when did you start to realize that you didn't identify with the Islamic State anymore? That you kind of had this separation was from them? Was it when you were hit with the reality of going through court and being in a psychiatric hospital?
it was when I was actually in the county jail. uh, I was actually isolated from all the other inmates in there. I was put on basically, I don't want to call it solitary confinement because I was allowed outside and in the day room and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
but never around the other inmates. The only company I had were the guards who would occasionally play cards with me and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
Always pray. I would still pray 5 times a day
Mm-hmm.
while I was detained, and I would do all that inside the cell and and whatnot. And one of the guards happened to take interest because he had previously served in Afghanistan and Iraq,
Mm-hmm.
coincidentally, and had been exposed to some of that culture
Yeah.
over there. And my situation, and after some whole trauma of the entire experience and
Mm-hmm.
thinking it over and whatnot, I slowly, not like immediately, but
Mm-hmm.
slowly began to separate from the.
So, what is it that you disagree with them about?
Uh,
The Islamic State, that is. What caused
well,
that separation? Do you know what I mean?
yeah, got woken up to the reality of they were doing rather than the propaganda and they were doing basically. What I mean by that is, in their propaganda, it's portrayed as war with two camps, non-believers and believers
Mm-hmm.
mentality. Uh, they portray themselves as basically the only legitimate uh, of what we would call mujahideen or Islamic fighters in the world. Is what they would portray themselves as in their propaganda and whatnot. There's several mujahideen groups in Syria, and they're all rivaling each other and fighting each other as well.
Mm-hmm.
And one of Islamic State happens to just be one of these, and so that infighting between them and calling each other disbelievers and whatnot
Mm-hmm.
kind of turned me off to the entire thing.
So you said you were allowed outside in the day room while you were in the county jail.
Right.
So did you ever, did you ever have any interactions with any of the inmates
I was completely isolated by orders from the judge
mm-hmm.
from any of the other inmates
at all times?
at all
Okay.
times.
Yeah.
Do
The
you
only company I had were the guards who would occasionally play cards with me and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
do you think that was for your safety or because the judge thought you might try to talk to some of the other inmates about Islam and spread that and he didn't want that?
Um, I think it was probably a combination of the two. I think that there was a lot of news stories about uh, radicalization in prisons coming out, and it could have been a very big possibility that that's the reason I wasn't allowed around other inmates.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because I mean, I'm a skinny white guy, really not gonna attack any other inmate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you were involved with their Twitter, how involved were you? Was it just like there was an understanding of like the certain like maybe memes is the wrong word because you use the analogy to the alt-right kind of trolls. So was there kind of just an understanding of what you should post, or did you
Yeah,
actually receive like
everything about the Islamic State as an organization is completely decentralized and in
Mhm.
a cell-based network. Even though they have a leaders and an official leader,
Mhm.
still decentralized, even on the ground, as Baghdadi uh, is constantly moving from place to place and actually communicates with regional governors through handwritten letters. All of it is very decentralized, and so there's no official uh, dictations of what you should do or whatnot. So yeah, it's pretty much understood
Mhm.
and applied.
Yeah. Um so I just have a few like general questions about you.
Yeah,
They're a little inane, but it's just to get to know you more.
right.
So like what do you do in your free time now that you
It's,
well, first of all, I'm sorry. What did you do before during the probationary period?
um, well, it was read books
Mhm.
and stay home all day. Of course, I didn't have any of my religious materials, so most of it was secular literature.
Mhm.
Like I read Ayn Rand and Atlas Shrugged, all that, like that type of stuff.
Mhm.
And
Well,
picked my guitar back up after a couple of years of not playing it, and
mhm.
basically just would sit there all day and practice guitar or read,
Mhm.
do stuff like that, or watch TV.
Yeah. Have you kept those habits now that you're, allowed to go near computers again?
So I still play the guitar
Mhm.
quite frequently.
That's good. That's good for, stress relief and
Yeah.
yeah. Uh, Another question we have is do you have any movies that you like? Do you got any favorite movies? Do you got any movies that
Um,
you see them on and you're like, I'll watch that?
I really like the whole concept of the Matrix.
Mm-hmm. Those are good movies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about music? Do you have a favorite artist or a favorite band?
I really like some Spanish influenced guitar,
Mm-hmm.
Latin type stuff.
That's cool. So it's just not really any, you get the classic American bands or anything. You
Right.
just kind of like people playing
To
their
be
guitar.
quite into the hardcore and the metal scene
Mm-hmm.
with the mosh pits and the screaming and all that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I've kind of shied away from all that.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't really fit person really.
So, have you had any problems since you've been released? Have you had struggled finding a job or getting into a college or anything like that with the misdemeanor on
Luckily,
your record?
I've been looking for a job ever since I was released, which was, and I j- I didn't find one until just recently, in the past couple of months.
Mm-hmm.
Would be willing to take me on.
Yeah. What kind of job is it? You don't have to be
I
specific.
worked at
Just.
a local pizza place making pizza,
Mm-hmm. That's good. Have you ever faced?
really night shift.
Oh yeah. Have you ever faced any discrimination for your beliefs?
I definitely did in high school.
Mm-hmm.
I used to,
What kinds of things did people say to you?
well, it wouldn't have been that big of a problem if, and about it, I would intentionally uh, provoke people by doing things like sitting down for the Pledge of Allegiance and
Mm-hmm.
praying in the courtyard
Mm-hmm.
and things like that, and wearing religious articles of clothing like which is like a checkered type of uh, cloth that's worn on the head
Mm-hmm.
or on the neck.
Mm-hmm.
Well, from the very beginning, people would call me a terrorist for not standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. And when I was praying in the courtyard, people would think that I was doing yoga or something. They didn't
Yeah.
really associate that with being religious.
Mm-hmm. So
But
you
yeah,
were kind of the only one, I'm assuming, that
yeah.
differed from the norm so much at your high school.
Even I met some Saudis who came through town. S- One of them was a senior, one of them was junior like me,
Mm-hmm.
and uh, their parents were here because their dad was training with the U.S. military, and so yeah, they were. Uh, and we would pray together in the courtyard and whatnot, and that created a sense of community, even though it was very small.
Yeah. Do you think when people kind of called you a terrorist and misunderstood kind of your beliefs, do you think that pushed your radicalization? Do you think that was a factor in it?
Pretty big part because I would always uh, go home and want to show them, uh, really shove it in their face, and so I would uh, what I saw in the propaganda videos and whatnot of the combat footage and the most importantly the flags everywhere.
Mm-hmm. Did you ever, show anybody at school?
That probably got me into some trouble quite a bit actually. There's this one kid in my French class actually
Mm-hmm.
uh, who would mock me and whatnot, and I would really stupidly I would show him and boast about my Twitter and how many followers I had and how many like the networking and all that stuff,
Yeah.
and send him like execution videos and whatnot,
Yeah.
even though that sounds really terrible.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean,
And it turns out
he's what?
in the Navy now,
Mm.
person.
That's interesting. Uh, hold on one second. Okay, we're back. So we're coming close to the end time,
All right.
and we'd like to just thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was great.
Mm-hmm. It's the stuff you've told us is really interesting. I know, just about next to nothing about any of that stuff that you talked about, and we just like to really thank you once again.
It's a pleasure.